Aloha, it's Joe Pardavila. Welcome back to the Forbes Books Podcast. And Benjamin Franklin once said, "He that good for making excuses is seldom good for anything else." That quote is over 200 years old, and we just can't stop making excuses. But now there's a new book that could help us climb out of the muck of blame and excuses. It's called Nobody Cares Until You Do, Living Beyond the Blame, Excuses, and Doubts That Hold You Back. It's written by Robert Hunt and Salem Thyne. Now, joining me on the podcast this week is Robert Hunt. He's an executive coach who leads CEO peer groups in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and is driven to help people be the best version of themselves. Robert, thanks for joining me on the show.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. And I want to start by talking about the book. And a common thread in the book is one word: accountability. It's basically cover to cover. It's a big part of what you talk about. So before we get into what you write about, talk to me about why accountability is so important.
I don't think we even understand the term accountability in the world anymore. We originally were going to name this book Peak Accountability, Your Journey from a Victim to Victor. And we thought, man, no one's going to buy that book because nobody wants a book on how to be more accountable for a couple reasons. One is everybody thinks they already are accountable. And one of the keys to understanding accountability is the difference between accountability and responsibility. If you hire someone to do something and they show up and they do a crappy job and they leave, hey, I did it. And they're responsible because they showed up and they did the job. But accountable is to deliver on what you are expected to do. And so if you hire a guy to paint your house and he leaves trash in your yard and he misses spots and he stains the carpet, he did the job. He's responsible. But accountable would say that not only was he on time, he was pleasant while he was there, he cleaned up after himself, all the things that you'd want the experience to be. And in our world, we barely are responsible anymore. And for all kinds of reasons, we've created an environment where you don't need to own it anymore. The government shows up and does a lot of stuff for us, and then we become really entitled in our mindset. And we've taken all the responsibility out of the day-to-day functions because we've kind of digitized. No one is sitting there going, how do I get food? I don't have to hunt and kill a buffalo and cook it. I just go to the AM/PM and get a hot dog off the rotator. And so we've made it so easy to be lazy. And then there's this prevalent kind of angry mode that's been in the world for a while. It got really ugly when Trump took office, and then when COVID hit and we started drawing lines between who wears a mask and who doesn't wear a mask, and who did you vote for, and what do you believe in, and do you take the vaccine, do you not? And people were hating each other. And so we've gotten to this place where we don't own our own crap, and we're mad about the crap that you own. And so we blame and we're mad, and it's just ugly. And so we believe the solution is accountability, but no one even understands it, and that's what this book is about.
And in the book, you write about, Robert, nobody can hold anyone accountable. We can only do that for ourselves. However, we can be bold and honest with people in our lives so they wake up and see the opportunity for a better life if they choose the power of peak accountability. Peak accountability, you mentioned that you thought that would have been a good idea for the book, and you're like, oh, let's not do that. How do we do that for other people? I mean, it's hard enough for ourselves, but can you teach other people to be accountable? Because it's what's the old thing, do as I say, not as I do. So it's sometimes easier to not even do it yourself. But how do you tell other people to be accountable?
Well, you have to create an environment where they want to be accountable. Nobody can hold anyone accountable. I learned this a hard way throughout my life as I watch people with their actions. I used to be in a guys' accountability group at my church. We meet every week and talk about how's life? What are you doing? How do you be a good husband? How do you be a good father? How do you honor the Lord in your life? And then we'd meet for years, and then out of the blue, one guy would say, yeah, I'm getting divorced. And we're like, hey, wait, what the heck? How come you never said you had problems in your marriage? I thought we were an accountability group. And he wouldn't say a word about what was really bothering him. And so people say, hey, hold me accountable to losing weight. And then you ask them a month later, how's it going? And they're like, oh, yeah, I've been working out, But they're not really wanting to be accountable. They want to put the weight on you to hold me accountable, but they're not owning it themselves. So it never works when you say, hold me accountable. Some of my clients say, I'm going to hold my employees accountable. You can't. Because if you ask them a question, they could lie. Hey, did you get that done? I sure did. And then you go out and it doesn't get done, and you come back and they go, oh, I thought I did. And if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. But if you can create an environment where people want to be accountable, then they'll make themselves accountable, and you can enjoy the benefit of that.
And when you enjoy something, you're satisfied. And in the book, you break it down with the satisfaction wheel.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
We didn't want a book where we just lecture people about how to run your life. I mean, Salem and I, we got our own issues. We're trying to be good husbands. We're trying to be good fathers. We work really hard at it. And we run businesses and we've got employees. And so we get all of that. And we're not experts in anything. We've just lived life enough to see where the stuff isn't working. And we've experienced this in our own lives. And the foundation of anything in having your own life and owning it and choosing the life you want to live is to be aware of where you are. Because people aren't aware where they're not being accountable. So we start by saying, listen, just take a minute, look at your life and say, are you happy with your life? Do you like your life? And you do this little assessment on the wheels, and you very quickly can identify areas that you don't like, that you're not happy with. And then you say, okay, now what are you going to do about it? And it's at that moment that you decide if you're going to be accountable. Let's say I don't like my finances. I don't have enough money. I can say my stupid boss doesn't pay me enough. The government takes too much in taxes. My parents never gave me money like all these rich kids got. Taxes are too high. Gas is too high. We can blame everything and make excuses. Or I can get a different job. Or I can go to school and get a degree where I can get a different job. Or maybe I can't. Maybe I just spend less. You see people who say, well, it's really ridiculous to make this minimum wage. Then don't spend beyond what you make. Well, you can't even afford an apartment. Maybe you can't afford a good one. But maybe you can afford to split a house with somebody. I remember meeting a family when I grew up in Orange County who lived all in one apartment, dad, mom, 3 kids. And I thought, how sad that they all have to be in that little apartment. And I used to pick up one of the kids and take him to church in the morning. And I thought, we'll do all we can to help them get by. And they were just so happy, but they had this one little apartment they all lived in. Come to find out, the guy owned the apartment complex, but he didn't want to have his family broken up into 2 apartments. So they all piled into one. And they lived within their means. They were in one little apartment, but he owned the whole complex.
Wow.
And so when people complain about why they don't have this or that, they're not willing to change something to make it better. And that's what our book talks about. I had a ton of debt. I owed $90,000 in debt between credit cards and government debt.
Ooh.
And I was very overwhelmed. And I just felt I can't do anything about it. Well, I could do something about it. I just didn't want to do something about it. So we finally decided, and the book goes through all this, we're going to sell the house and pay off all the debt. And we sold our house, paid off all of our debt, moved into a small rental, a wonderful home. It's still a nice house to live in, half the size of the house we used to live in. Sold all our furniture because it wouldn't fit here. But then when COVID hit in March of 2020, I took all the money we had, paid it all off by April. I was free of any debt.
Wow.
And I lived through that really difficult time with no pressure because I didn't owe any money. It turned out my business blew out the door because since I took the weight of the finances off my shoulders, I could think clearly and I could make better decisions out of logic and drive instead of fear. And I started to grow the business like crazy. So once I conquered that problem that was weighing me down, I believed, there's other things I'm not happy with. I went back to that wheel and I thought, I'm not happy with my business. It's not what it should be. It's just a very nice job, but I want to make it a business. So I started changing things and I hired an employee. And we had radical growth during those 2 years because I was confident in what I was doing. I wasn't saddled with emotions of my debt. I could make good decisions and boldness. And now the business is triple what it was when I started back in the end of 2019.
Wow.
And I have an employee. We're doing great. And now I can take other things that I never thought I could fix because I've now conquered things I believe that actually more is possible than I used to see.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First, I want to say I love the fact that you say you and Salem are not experts, because to me, the word experts, Robert, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. I feel it's like one of those things that people like throw around and means absolutely nothing. Like you'll see someone, a political expert, pop culture expert. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what did they go to school? Is there an expert school? So I'm super glad that you brought that up. And you understand that as well. That's why you probably even mentioned that.
Yeah, like what's that phrase that the one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind? And so if you know one little tad bit more than the next guy, you're all of a sudden an expert. I have a friend who's a lawyer, and he says, don't ever call me an expert. I just have a lot of knowledge about something.
Ditto.
And I think I like the way he does that because he doesn't want to position himself as an expert because that's a big statement.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm telling you, you and I are on the same wavelength. I mean, I wrote a book about podcasting earlier this year, and every once in a while they would like pitch it as, podcasting. I'm like, no. And I actually use the same words as your lawyer. I'm like, I'm not an expert. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know some things. And
I know more than you.
Yeah, I know a little more than you, and that's about all I got. I'm no better
Yes.
than you. I just have a little more experience doing so. And the other thing you mentioned earlier was about awareness. And I'm a big fan of self-awareness and trying to improve self-awareness. And you talk about in the book about people's lack of awareness, and that sort of affects accountability. Why do you think we have such a awareness problem today? Are we just too distracted? Are we too into ourselves? What is it about awareness with all of us?
We really think that we've lost the urgency to own things anymore because so many things are given to us and so many things become expected. When the government did the payouts during COVID, people got these checks and they like, hey, this is really great, the first one you got. And then the second one, hey, this is really great. Well, then where's the third one? How come I get a third one? All of a sudden, with 2 checks, you're all of a sudden entitled. And the whole point was it was a stimulus to help you get through the hard times. And then it became expected. A lot of my clients own their own business. And they're business owners here in Dallas. They want to care for their employees and do nice things for them. But if they give them an annual bonus, that annual bonus becomes expected. And it's not like, hey, we did great last year, let's pay out some money. Hey, next year we did great again, let's give you some more money. The third year when things go bad because we lost a big client or we had a fire and all of a sudden we're not making money, hey, where's our bonus? All of a sudden it's expected. And so I think the level of entitlement that our nation has come to is bizarre. And we want to blame everybody for everything and people just don't own it. In the old days, if you didn't plant corn, 6 months later, you're not eating. If you didn't go hunt, you didn't eat. If you didn't build a house, you slept in the cold snow. So you had to do stuff or die. Well, we've changed all that. Technology makes it where you can get by pretty good with not doing much. And then the government continues to make some dependency on them, which keeps them happy by letting them give us supplements to our rent, to our groceries, to all these things. And there are a lot of people who need it, who are in bad place. And I'm thankful that there are people who care enough to help. But if all the people treated each other the way we should treat them, we wouldn't need the government to do stuff. Frankly, as a born-again Christian, I'm most critical of the church because if the church just behaved like Jesus called us to act, we wouldn't need the government to do so much stuff. But we spend all our time telling everyone how messed up they are instead of caring for them. That's not what Jesus taught. Jesus showed grace first, and then he spoke truth. But we like to go around yelling at people and saying you're going to hell instead of saying, hey, let me help you. Let me serve you. And so people are just angry at each other. We're not stepping up. We've built this laziness and entitlement. And that's just kind of where we are today. So whatever the method that we got there caused that to be, that's where we are. We're just trying to say, can I just show you a better way?
And you work with a lot of leaders in your day job with the Renaissance Executive Forums. And I want to talk about how leaders can use a lot of the things you write about in the book, accountability, awareness, satisfaction. What do you hope this book will do for leaders out there who maybe, as they read it, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, that makes sense, but I don't know if I can do it. Because a lot of it, reading your book, Robert, it's all very common sense driven. And I feel like that's probably was part of the whole mission. And some folks may be like, yeah, I get that, but I don't know if I can do it. What do you say to those people?
We've done it. We've modeled it. We've done it. We've tested it. We've failed. We tweaked it. We got better. We own it. We are doing it every day in our lives. The book is written not for business people, but for everybody. My son, who's 20 years old going to college, read it and came back and said, wow, I didn't realize how many times I'm quick to blame something. Different people who have come back and told us after they read it how that spoke to them. It's written for the average person. And it will be really great for business owners, but it's not a business book. We wanted to be very intentional about that. So we use non-business words. Only one time do we actually throw out some kind of business speakage, which is that SMART goals later on in the book about how you set stuff and be specific. But we want it to apply to everybody. And everyone can do it. These are really, really easy principles. You just never thought of it that way. Look, if I'm not satisfied with my life, what do I want it to look like? I want it to look like this. Okay, what would it take? Well, I'd have to do this. Okay, do it. Well, I can't. Wait, don't say you can't. Chapter 4. When you say you can't, change it to I won't. And if I won't, why not? Well, it'd be hard. Well, don't you want it? Yes. Okay, how bad do you want it? And so when the pain of where you are is worse than the pain of where you'll have to go, you'll change. And when I sat there stressed about my finances for years and years and years, when I finally said enough, in the book I talk about how I got vertigo for 16 days and I couldn't do anything. I turned to Kathy. I said, we owe $90,000. You're screwed because I can't work a day of my life, the rest of my life, because I got vertigo. We're screwed. And it was at that point I said, this is too much. And so when I got over vertigo, thank you, Lord, and it came back to normal, I said, we got to change our lives. And so when the pain of where I was so unbearable, I was willing to change. I was willing to sell my beautiful house with a movie theater upstairs and gorgeous fine furniture in a lovely neighborhood and start over. I was willing to put all that change and pain there because it was less than the pain of my debt. And when it was all done and I paid it all off and I woke up one morning sitting there having time with the Lord in the morning, I had this weird feeling that I hadn't felt in years. It was peace. I didn't have any worry. I didn't have to work today if I didn't want to. I didn't have to worry about when the next paycheck was coming in because I didn't spend hardly any money. And we had some money because we've been saving so much. All the money we had to pay monthly payments on bills now became revenue. Now we could save. So we'd immediately put $1,000 in the bank. I mean, boom. And so everything was different when you took the weight off of your back. So the pain of where you were at was worse than the pain of where I had to go. I made the change.
And speaking of the fact that this is not your typical business book, because not many business books have a portion of it called The Opportunity in the Suck. And you kind of described a little bit of that there, but you write about when you embrace the suck, you take the time to fully examine your role in your reality. And that's basically what you did when you were hit with those money problems, vertigo. You in a way, you embraced the suck.
Yeah. And Salem and I have walked through this same thing over and over. And a lot of the stories, all the stories that are in the book there tell where we had to look at it and go, hey, it's going to suck to sell your beautiful house. And when my neighbors are come by, hey, you guys are moving your son's house? Why? Well, honestly, I didn't manage my finances well, and I got really heavy into debt, and this is the best way to get out of it. And they look at me like, oh, wow, what's that? Honesty?
Yeah.
And it was embarrassing, and I had to give up a lot of stuff I really liked, and it sucked. And it sucked especially for my wife, who was patient and kind through all this, but she'd built a beautiful home and I was pulling it all away. And so some things suck, but it sucked less than living in debt. And the emotion and the beatdown, I didn't even realize how unhappy I was till I could compare it to the joy I was having of not being in debt. It's like the frog in the water where you slowly increase the temperature and it doesn't realize anything till it cooks itself to death. I'd become comfortable with, I owed 1,000, I owed 5,000, I owed 20,000, I owed 50,000. And it just kept going, it kept going. And you're like, well, I get by a minimum payments. Chapter 10 in or chapter 6 in our book, I think, is wait and hope. Hey, maybe next year I'll get a bonus. Hey, maybe next year my business will grow. You know, I tried. Let's see if it gets any better. And it doesn't. You do nothing about it. You're an idiot. Because bad things rarely get better. They get worse. And so every year my debt got worse and worse. It never magically went away. And you're a fool to think it is. When I got rid of our debt, I realized, you know, I really could have a business. So I started building a business and it took off. And now I've done this and that. And I go, you know, actually I can do things. I believe in myself. I have confidence. So one of my things I was sort of satisfied with was being fat. And I'm like, oh, you're fat, but I'm okay with it because you got bigger problems. When I fix those problems, I realized, you know, I'm really not happy being fat. My back always hurts. My knees hurt. I don't sleep well, blah, blah, blah. And I decided I don't want to be fat. And so I did something about it. And I've lost 35 pounds already. And I'm going to go back to the weight I was when I married my beautiful bride. And it's doing it because I believe I can, even though it's hard. I want it. And so when you conquer one thing, it magically opens up your eyes to say, I could do something else. And then I do that thing. And I did two things and they both work. I could do a third thing. And so you start to have this momentum, which is what I see with business owners. They do something and they rock it. So that gives them momentum to try another thing. They're willing to take more risks because they've seen they can do stuff. They believe in themselves. They have confidence. But we're so beat down because life has hard things in the first place. But then your own head trash weighs you down with lies that you can't do something and you would never do this. Those are lies. Those are excuses that make our lives miserable. If you don't like your life, decide what you want it to look like, embrace the suck, and go do it.
Where does this honesty piece comes from for you? Because, you know, you're obviously a man of faith, but not every man of faith is incredibly honest.
That's a good point.
The history books is full of people who are people of faith and not honest. Where does that come from for you? Is that your upbringing? Is that your DNA? Is that your operating system? Because if you read the book, Talk to You Now, You're brutally honest about everything you went through. A lot of things that you mentioned in the book and talk about today are stuff many people would not dare say to another human being outside of their very close circle. So where does honesty come from you?
That's a great question. I tell you, as a kid, I was a great liar. I used to lie constantly. And as I got older, I used to forget my lies, and I'd get caught in them. I'll tell you the story about the time when I was an apartment manager, and I told some guy I ran a dojo, I ran a karate studio because he was buff and I was afraid of him. So I told him I taught Kung Fu. And then like a month later, he's walking through the quad and he's like, "Hey, how's the dojo going?" I'm like, "What dojo?" And I forgot my lie. And so sometime in my early 20s, I realized, you're not a good liar, so just stop lying. And then actually, it was a lot easier to just be honest about stuff. But I was never brutally honest until I learned to speak truth in love. But it really started with me owning my own crap. I've realized, though, the vision of what I want to achieve in the world requires that I be brutally honest. I work with business owners and CEOs here in Dallas, and they got a lot of junk they deal with. And sometimes watching someone else be really radically transparent and candid inspires them to let go of their own crap. And so I've found that being transparent and real frees up my clients to do the same. And I've just been doing it for the last 10 years so much. I've learned how to confront people with awkward conversations because I love them. I care about them enough to say, "Hey, I'm genuinely concerned you're an alcoholic. Hey, I'm genuinely concerned that you tell me you want to have a good marriage, but you don't do jack for it." And I can have these conversations because they know I love them. And I get the freedom to speak into their lives because I've proven I love them by the way I've treated them all these years. So if I want to affect change in the world, I've got to be brutally honest with myself, and I've got to be willing to tell that to other people to inspire them. Salem talks about committing suicide in the book and how it didn't work, but he tried to kill himself. He thought his life was over, and he woke up the next morning and go, "Well, that didn't work. But now what do I do?" And nobody cared. Nobody noticed he tried to kill himself. He woke up in his own vomit in a box, didn't even know how he got there. And he's like, "Okay, nobody cares. Go do something with your life." And that's the whole thing where I called it nobody cares. There's a point in your life where you go, "Look, I got this problem, and this guy's a jerk, and my ex-wife did this, and these people do this, and I'm trying all I can." Hey man, nobody cares if you're happy. Nobody cares if you're fat or if you're broke. Nobody cares if you're miserable until you do. When you care and you start to do something, the whole world will rally around you to care and help with you. But you got to own it first. People are coming out of the woodwork to help me in my journey because I'm real with them and saying, "I want to do this." And they go, "This is great. Let me help you." We also talk about in the book that sometimes when you really decide you want to change your life, you have to evaluate that maybe I haven't had the best friends in the world. And maybe I need to change who I'm influenced by because they've encouraged my bad behavior, or they've at least looked the other way and not been one to challenge me on it. I need someone who will sharpen me and be my best. And you got to surround yourself with those people, because in embracing that suck means it's going to be hard. And if I don't have people on my side that challenge me to say, "You could do this, you are sharp, let me encourage you," you'll quit and you'll go back to being a victim. So you got to surround yourself with people who believe in you, who will care for you. And they're there if you'll be real and reach out for help.
You mentioned radical candor and brutal honesty, and I know many of book have been written over the last several years about that. I know Netflix is big on that. Reed Hastings teaches that to all of his people at Netflix. And I know you work with a lot of CEOs with your Renaissance Executive Forums, but I wonder, I'm sure for CEOs it's great to give brutal, radical candor to their people. How do you advise these folks who are incredibly high-achieving people? They've done a lot in their lives. How can they accept radical candor and brutal honesty? Is that something that you've had to help these leaders along with?
Yeah, it's not easy. Frankly, the kind of person who's so driven and so confident that they can survive the challenges of business tends to kind of believe their own press after a while. One of the things we require in our group is that you must be radically transparent and radically open, or it doesn't work. And so that's why I have a really hard time finding people for our groups, because they don't want that. And they just like being in their own little empire, and they like people saying yes to them, and they don't want to put their stuff out for everyone to see. So It isn't easy. If you, though, experience great transformation in your life by being open and letting people care about you, you'll never go back. It's just getting that first moment. So start small. Start with something simple. I mean, if you're a business owner, there's two people who know all your dark secrets, your banker and your lawyer, or your accountant and your lawyer. And, numbers don't lie. And when you've got to go to court, you better be telling your lawyer the truth, because otherwise you're going to get in a world of hurt. So there's people who know your stuff. Practice something like that in some safe area of your life. Let's just say you want to lose weight. Tell someone what you weigh. I weighed 261 pounds when I started my weight loss program a couple months ago. And I told a couple of my friends, I weigh 261 pounds. They looked at me like, how can anybody weigh 261? I go, dude, it's not that hard. There's a lot of people way fatter than me. But I had to declare it and tell them. And so we just encourage our leaders to take baby steps in that journey. But it starts when they meet with me and they talk about their life. And I require that, hey, if you're going to be in the group, you got to be open. So let's talk about your world. And they try it with me and they survive it. And then when they see that brings value, then they are willing to bring it to the group. Some people take a little longer, but it's the only way you're going to get. So you have to have a vision of, I want to be better, and I'm willing to be transparent in order to achieve that.
It's funny. For years, Robert, and you've heard this for years as well, it would be good if our political leaders, our presidents were business leaders, people who were big in business. And then we get Trump, and then you realize maybe it's not a good idea, because all of a sudden Trump is the president, and instead of being surrounded by yes people, he's surrounded by 300 million Americans and the media, and they're like questioning things. And I think that's one of the reasons Trump was so irritable, because for his entire life, he was surrounded by folks, say what you will about Trump, but he was surrounded by folks who had to agree with what he said,
or did what he wanted,
or they were gone. And so now that he's holding public office, he's not surrounded, obviously in his inner circle and in the Oval Office he will be, but outside of that, no, people are going to push back. I mean, even like the Mike Bloombergs of the world, anyone in their right mind who was honest on Mike Bloomberg and said, Mike, maybe you shouldn't spend like $1 billion on running for office, but Mike Bloomberg is a billionaire, so he thinks he can. So in theory, it's great that a business person, holds office here in the United States, but if they come from a world where their entire lives, or for a majority of it, they were just surrounded by people who said, yes, boss.
Yes.
That's not the best leader.
Yeah. And I loved a lot of the things Trump wanted to do, but he was such a jerk about it that, you can, the Bible says, speak truth in love. And, if you're going to really care for people, it's the tone of what you do it. It's the way you present it with humility. And in my role as a coach, I'm an executive coach, I don't tell my clients what to do ever. But I ask them, well, what do you want to do? And they ask enough questions that they self-discover what they want. Trump was so abusive and so harsh, and I get why he did it, the shock factor and breaking the bureaucracy of government. It's so broken on so many levels, and I get it. But man, you just get, it was so harsh that he just offended the world and it shut everything down. It's a broken system. We're still the best nation in the world, on the planet, but we still got lots of issues. But it really rings to the point that you do need people who will be around who challenge you, and you got to listen to them. If you want to be your best version of yourself, you've got to be radically transparent and open. And that's hard. But if you really want the best version of yourself, you'll do that because you see a vision of what it could be, and you'll make yourself open for that benefit.
Yeah, I mean, and not that you need to be surrounded by a room full of naysayers, but definitely fill a couple of those seats with people that are not afraid to push back, because you don't want them all to push back, because then all of a sudden you'll never make a decision. Right. But as long as you have some balance there, where you have people, and when you talk to these folks in your group, whether it's filling a board seat or executive positions, I mean, how do you even find people like that? I mean, is that during the interview process, the recruiting process? Like, hey, if I hire you, will you disagree with me? Like, is it as simple as that? I mean, how do you get to that point where you can get people comfortable to push back on the boss?
You'd be surprised, and I'm sure there's professionals who do techniques and interview processes, but if you engage someone in a conversation, they're pretty quickly going to tell you what they think. And even if you're trying to be politically correct and answer all the interview questions right, there's only takes a few moments of someone saying why something happens to understand how they look, how they respond. But I think good leaders engage in conversations all day long. not only with the people they're interviewing, but with their team. And they know how to embrace the different sides of the coin. Diversity and inclusion has a really weird reputation. Some people feel like it's being shoved down their throat and they hate it. Other people think no one's doing anything about it. But you want as diverse a group of people as you can get, not just race, color, and gender, but with people who think differently than you. Because it makes you sharp, because the world thinks differently than you. You're a fool if you surround yourself with a bunch of yes people, because that's not how the world's going to respond to you. Same with your friends. If your friends say, yeah, you're not fat, you just, you don't have time to work out, you're working hard, and let's go have a beer together. They're not friends who really support you. They're just saying yes. But then you have to take tons of medicine, you're borderline diabetic, you spend all this money on doctor appointments. If you just quit the booze, I've saved so much money when I quit drinking, because I was going through a lot of bourbon every week.
Oh boy.
And if I just cut out the booze for a couple months, I'm saving hundreds of dollars. I'm not eating fast food, I'm saving hundreds of dollars. And my body doesn't hurt, so I'm not seeing doctors, so I'm saving hundreds of dollars. Man, I can make money on this deal.
That's great. And, let's end on an optimistic note, because you obviously work every day with business leaders around the Dallas-Fort Worth area and across the country. What are leaders doing well today? Speaking anecdotally, speaking broad strokes, what are leaders, the folks you work with, the folks that you see on the ground day to day, what are they doing right? What are they doing well? What's going on that's really good in the world of business leadership today?
Man, if I had to choose one thing, I would say that they make decisions. I think a bad leader doesn't make a decision. You have to at least make a decision. You won't always make the right one, but you need to make a decision. And there's different styles in leadership. Some people do a ton of research and look at all kinds of things and work over the math and think it over, and then they make a decision. Other people look at something and go, okay, let's go. Boom, let's go. And they both work sometimes. And sometimes this is good and sometimes that good, but there's a need for all different kinds of leadership types. But my clients that I spend time with, that I watch them succeed, is because they make a decision. Inventory constraints, make a decision. Can't find good employees, make a good decision. You're having customers that are leaving because they're going bankrupt, make a decision. And you can't blame the world. Everybody went through COVID. We were in 1,000 different boats, rowing in all different kinds of directions, but it was still the same ocean. It was still the same storm. And you can't blame the government, you can't blame COVID, you can't blame anything. You got to own it. And my clients, they make decisions. I think that's what makes them great leaders.
And I'm going to put it on you. What makes you a good leader?
Oh man, I don't think I am that great of a leader.
Well, not great. How about a good? Let's go. Don't go good to great. Just good. What makes you a good leader, Robert? I mean, obviously you've laid out a plan with your book and what you've been talking about. But just in simplest terms, what makes you good at what you do?
I genuinely care for people, and I think that's what supplemented my lack of discipline, my lack of skill, my lack of experience, is my heart for people. So I think that's carried my shortcomings in a lot of areas. Speaking of good to great, when you look at, what are you uniquely qualified to do? What are you passionate about? What can you make money on? That's my business. I do that exactly. And I'm really good at it, and I do it really well. And I have something nobody else can do. But I lack the discipline to continue to document, to build processes. And so I would have a great relationship, enjoy time with someone, and then not follow up. So I hired people. I've delegated the things that I'm not good at. And so because I care for them, they love working for me, and that's a great team. But I'm bringing all the strengths that they have to supplement my weaknesses. I don't want to learn to be a better documenter. I want to hire someone who does. And I let go of it and go focus on what I'm really great at, which is spending time with my clients. I'm really great at that. So Angie runs our business. Kathy organizes and creates vision and drives it. We have other foreign group leaders that are going to come alongside and drive groups. And I'm going to do what I'm best at, which is caring for people.
Robert, thank you so much for the time. I will see you around the dojo one of these days. We'll work on our karate or taekwondo.
Come on by for some free lessons next time. No problem.
Well, I really appreciate the time, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Robert. Once again, that's Robert Hunt, the co-author of Nobody Cares Until You Do, Living Beyond the Blame, Excuses, and Doubts That Hold You Back. You can pick it up at Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And that wraps up another episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoy the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.